Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today is Sunday, so we are doing Breaches of the Week, and this week is on time. And as always, before I begin, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me a lot of these breaches. It's always appreciated, and that would be Barrett Peterson, Jacqueline Wolf, Jason Dance, and David Walker. Thank you so much, and if you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it my way, and I'm happy to give you a shout out as well. And with that, let's actually start with Excellion. This is an update. As you know, I've been talking about them for the past few breaches of the week, and they are still the front runner for the worst breach of 2021, as a whole bunch of organizations are now coming out saying they got hit due to the weaknesses in Excellion's file transfer system. And so the new disclosures for this week are the Transport for New South Wales of Australia. They're basically saying that some information was taken but not disclosing. The American Bureau of Shipping, Netherlands-based Fugro, life sciences company Danaher, and the Harvard Business School. Although Harvard did not disclose the name of the third party, but a quick Google search showed me that Harvard actually uses Excellion for file transfers, so here we are. If not, Harvard Business School had their own separate data breach, but I believe it's an Excellion, and we'll probably find that out sooner than later. Moving on, I'm going to give you an update on Blackbaud, who was in the running for the 2020 worst breach of the year until SolarWinds came around. Companies and organizations are still disclosing as a result of it, and this week we see the University of Aberdeen in the United Kingdom disclose that they were caught up in the 2020 Blackbaud data breach. Hopefully no more will disclose, and that will eventually get closed altogether. Moving on, let's talk about U.S. mobile carrier T-Mobile. They disclosed a data breach after an unknown number of customers were apparently affected by what's called a SIM swap attack. Now, if you're not familiar with this, SIM swap fraud, also known as SIM hijacking, essentially allows a criminal to take control of the target's phone after porting them using social engineering or bribing mobile operator employees to a SIM controlled by the fraudster. And here we are. So basically, your phone can get transferred out. Your phone number can get transferred out just to another SIM card on the account possibly, or basically on a fraudulent account, and then rack up bills on your behalf. So heads up, if you're a T-Mobile user, you may have been caught up in a SIM hijack. Moving on, let's talk about airplane maker Bombardier. They are out of Canada, and here's an update. I mentioned them, I want to say it was a couple of months ago or so. They just disclosed on February 23rd that their security breach was actually published in the dark web by the Clop ransomware gang. I went and checked that out, and sure enough, Clop did post all of Bombardier's information. So that's obviously a very serious problem for the airplane maker. They chose obviously not to pay that ransom. Moving on, I want to give you guys an update on Wawa. This is the supermarket chain here in the United States. Following a wave of lawsuits after a data breach affected its 850 locations along the East Coast, Wawa may have to pay up to $9 million in gift cards and cash payments to people who use a debit or credit card at a fuel pump or inside their store between March 4th of 2019 and December 12th of 2019. This obviously was months long, as the attackers installed a malware into the system, exposing cardholders' names, card numbers, expiration dates. The malware, though, did not capture PIN numbers or CVV2 numbers, but heads up, if you shop at Wawa, basically, throughout 2019, from March to December, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on, let's talk about gaming company 32Red, because on Thursday, February 18th, they disclosed customers logging in were met with other players' accounts information on that day. Now, the information that the players saw was essentially the wrong account holder's name, as well as the last four digits and expiration of their credit cards. Usernames, real names, email addresses, and billing addresses, along with mobile numbers, were also exposed to a quote-unquote limited number of 32Red customers. They are saying only 118 accounts were affected. Hopefully that number doesn't grow. Moving on, let's talk about Gab. This is a social media platform that is very similar to Parler and who uses it. Now, they published a very curious blog post denying that they had actually suffered a data breach. Now, while it mysteriously went offline for a short time about a week ago or so, at the time, they claimed that the only problem was some kind of Bitcoin wallet spam affecting only a few accounts. But here's where this takes a twist. Gab's CEO wrote that the site was contacted by reporters about an alleged data breach that may have leaked archives of posts, direct messages, profiles, and hash passwords of Gab users. Now, their CEO says there's no independent confirmation that a breach took place and claims the site doesn't collect that much personal information about its users anyway, but still accuses the unnamed reporters of working with a criminal hacker to smear their reputation. Now, he also admitted that the site is aware that it had a vulnerability for SQL injection attack and that it basically fixed that flaw last week, followed by a security audit that they say is still ongoing. Where all of this leads so far is hard to tell, but a reporter linked to the leak site DDoS Secrets tweeted, and I quote, "Yes, we have the data," and promised more information, quote unquote, soon enough. So we may see a Parler style hit on Gab where all of this information was put out there. And if you were remembering the Capitol 6 or the January 6th Capitol riots and all of that, Gab is one of those social media platforms that a lot of those people use. So it may be very interesting to see what goes on here. I will definitely keep you informed on that. Moving on. Let's talk about the new audio-based social media platform that's invite-only called Clubhouse. You may or may not have heard of this. Clubhouse has allegedly suffered a data breach as a third-party developer designed an open-source app that allows Android smartphone users to access the invite-only, iPhone-only service. And basically, this is what's happening here. You can only get this on the iPhone or the iPad. Now, the app, which launched in March of 2020, has quickly gained popularity. It's raised $100 million in funding this past January. And so, according to reports, a programmer in mainland China designed and made available an open source code on GitHub. And basically, this developer said to have designed basically code that would allow anyone to listen to audio on Clubhouse with actually getting an invite code with access to various personal sessions. And so, I actually have a Clubhouse account, so if you're on there, you can find me, but it's interesting because it is invite only. I actually have a test iPhone I have to use it on because I don't carry an iPhone regularly, and it's interesting, but essentially the way it works is you get invited from a friend that essentially you get a code from, and that allows you to log in, you tag it to your phone number, and on, and so this app apparently, or this source code, whatever this person put out, essentially would allow me to install this onto an Android phone and see all of the listings of basically all of the audio chats that are going on and everything. So obviously that's a big issue for Clubhouse. I'm sure they're looking into that, and we'll close that down. Moving on. Let's talk about Covenant Healthcare in Michigan. They confirmed that 2 employee email accounts were accessed by an unauthorized third party, leading them to notify roughly 45,000 potentially affected individuals of this breach. Now, these emails may have contained names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, medical diagnosis and clinical information, medical treatment information, prescription information, doctor's names, medical record numbers, patient account numbers, and medical insurance information. So if you use Covenant Healthcare in Michigan, heads up to you. Moving on, let's head on over to India and talk about the Indian Army. Yes, the military of India. The Indian Army is probing a data breach in their northern command after a soldier was found to have passed on tactical and operational Indian military data to Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. Now, India today has learned that the data leaks include top secret military maps, deployment specifics, patrolling routes, positions of forward troops, and assets on the line of actual control and the line of control. Apparently, line of actual control and line of control or I'm guessing military terms for the military in India, but obviously that's a huge problem as currently India and Pakistan are in conflict over the region of Kashmir. Both have a claim, so this could be very difficult, obviously, for India if their plans were leaked to Pakistan. So, heads up to you. Moving on. I actually am thinking about doing a new segment of the week called GDPR Violators of the Week. These are the companies this week that got fined for GDPR violations, meaning they are violating European Union's right to privacy or right to be forgotten in their platform. So on February 22nd, a security company whose name is not currently available due to security concerns in Croatia was fined by the GDPR. On the 23rd, Deutsche Wohen SE out of Germany was fined. And on the 24th, Avalon Center 2016 SL in Spain was fined by GDPR. So heads up, if you use any of those organizations, they may be violating your data per GDPR law, especially if you're an EU citizen. Moving on, let's talk about Walsh Brothers Construction. They got hit with ransomware, and quote, it was possible that certain files containing personal information of employees and former employees may have been exfiltrated by the malicious actor. Now, as we know of so far, at least 11 people are affected, but that is from a New Hampshire breach disclosure requirement that they had, and from what I understand, Walsh Construction is much larger than that, so only 11 people in New Hampshire, but possibly more people in the Walsh Brothers organization. So hopefully they will get that rectified and move on from there. And moving on, let's talk about Uber. Yes, the car sharing app. I think this is actually really interesting because the Court of Queen's Bench in Alberta, Canada, in a recent case, dismissed an application for certification of a proposed class action resulting from a data breach because there was no evidence of harm or loss. Now, this class action followed what they're calling a hacking event in which attackers obtained Uber usernames, phone numbers, and email addresses from the cloud. Uber did not initially reveal the data breach to a class action, and in 3 years following the incident, they're saying there was no evidence of fraud, identity theft, or any other economic loss. This actually stems from the 2018, I believe it was 2018, Uber breach, where essentially they got hit, they paid the ransom, and then they tried to cover it up. They didn't tell everybody, essentially their tens of millions of users, that their potential banking information, whatever that is, was out into the dark web. I basically have railed against Uber ever since for that, as that lack of transparency is a complete loss of trust, and their corporate culture has some issues as well. Canada, obviously, going through class action capability because Uber's in Canada as well, and their courts are saying no. There's no evidence of harm on that, and therefore they are dismissing the case in the province of Alberta. So I'll keep you informed on that, but the Uber breach continues to haunt us to this day. Moving on. Let's talk about TikTok. This is the social media sharing app that is also a Chinese spy tool, and I've done multiple videos on this. Nobody should be using TikTok. They have agreed to pay $92 million to settle a data breach lawsuit. Now, the proposed settlement has been called one of the largest privacy-related payouts in history. It applies to over 89 million users, some as young as 6 years old, who claim that the company engaged in, and I quote, the theft of private and personally identifiable TikTok user data. Now, the data was tracked and sold to advertisers in violation of stated states and federal law. Excuse me. Obviously, any kids here in the United States under the age of 13 also fall under the COPPA, something that TikTok and a former company called Musical.ly, which TikTok bought, has violated quite a bit. And I have done videos and reporting on that as well. Now, while TikTok has agreed to pay out the settlement, of course, they have gone on the record saying they do not agree with the assertions of the lawsuit. However, they do believe that the settlement was the best path forward for them. So they're willing to lose $92 million, but they are not admitting culpability. Moving on. Let's talk about the Iranian military, and I think this is actually a really interesting one. Ukraine Security Service, the SBU, detained in the city of Kharkiv an agent of the Russian military intelligence, FSB, who was attempting to obtain technical documentation on the development and production of what is known as the Ukrainian T-84BM Oplot main battle tank. That's right, they were trying to get plans on the battle tank. Now, apparently this Russian spy tried to recruit an employee at the state-owned Kharkiv Morozov Machine Building Design Bureau, which carries out the development of this tank, but SBU got wind of this and essentially ran a counter operation, and so the Russian spy, was receiving samples of technical materials from this employee and handed over photocopies to the representative of Russia's GRU military intelligence, also part of the FSB, that was essentially using getting this information. So they caught wind of this. They were able to arrest this individual, and here we are. And obviously the GRU is different from the FSB. I apologize for that confusion in my brain. I think I mistyped something in my notes here, so I apologize. Now, moving on, and finally, I want to talk about North Korea and Pfizer, yes, Pfizer, as well as BioNTech, their German counterpart, that have made the coronavirus vaccine. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because North Korean state-sponsored hackers attempted to breach the servers of Pfizer and BioNTech in the hopes of gathering scientific data that could be used to manufacture bootleg copies of the COVID-19 vaccine to sell in international black markets, and that's according to intelligence officials in Europe. Now, North Korea's intent was likely to raise funds in foreign currency. Obviously, their currency is pretty much useless outside of their borders, and so they have done a lot to try and raise hard currency like the US dollar, the euro, and others to sustain their economy. Now, 2 European security officials briefed on these operations but did not formally go on the record, told Business Insider that the attempted intrusion was likely an official North Korean operation to gather scientific data on the COVID-19 vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech. Both officials said the attempt was connected to November's announcement of multiple hacking intrusions via Microsoft's network infrastructure. Essentially, Office 365 came under attack by North Korea as they were looking to get into Pfizer, etc. Now, the European official said, and I quote, "It clearly was an information gathering attempt rather than malware or ransom style attack. I will not get into technical details, but we have developed plenty of experience with each type of attack. North Korea will have physical access to Pfizer vaccines long after they've seen Chinese or Russian versions, but they want to decide which will be the easiest to bootleg and transport for the black market, so they wanted to take a look to see if the Pfizer vaccine would be a viable dose to copy. We are not giving out any information on whether the hacking attempt succeeded, but if it had, I suspect the Pfizer vaccine would provide too many manufacturing and storage problems compared to the Russian or Chinese vaccine." Now, if you recall, the Pfizer vaccine requires it to be stored at something like minus 70 degrees or something like that, which means that if, let's say, you were manufacturing it yourself as a bootleg copy and following, let's say, the process correctly, so you actually did make the vaccine, it would have to be stored in sub-zero temperature. That's obviously going to be a very serious problem doing that in mass. Then again, we are talking about the black market, so here we are. Now, this is actually not new for Korea. For decades, North Korea has been basically accused of using its embassies as essentially lucrative outposts for organized crime, ranging from counterfeiting U.S. currency, dealing methamphetamine around the world via secure diplomatic pouches, selling arms to rogue regimes in violation of embargoes. North Korean scientists were recently caught in the Middle East and Iran and other places working on nuclear development for those countries in terms of weaponry. So the North Koreans wanting to hijack all of the BioNTech and Pfizer data and then make bootleg copies of it is keeping within what they do. I believe they're also one of the largest heroin dealers in the world as well. So there you go. Those were your breaches of the week. It was a pretty insane week for this. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.